Good evening, everyone. It's wonderful to be back here. In the last retreat, we went through what it is to doubt and what it is to experience contentment through doubt, through contentment. I would like to begin today by, in a sense, deepening that theme and really bringing it home. We speak in Buddhism of the one great matter, the one great matter of birth and death, the one great matter of life and death. It's the same thing. It may sound a bit perhaps abstract or rather big and large, but actually, if we open up to what is in the depths of our own heart, if we open up to what is underfoot, under our feet, we cannot avoid it. We cannot avoid it. Great doubt is fundamental, very basic in Zen Buddhism. But to make it easier to understand, I would like to focus on this great doubt and great contentment through the life of Gautama Buddha. It's all there. However, the real point is to find it in our own lives, not in somebody 2,500 years ago. But if it can help to illuminate what is under your own feet, please take it to heart. As many of you know, Gautama Buddha was sheltered, protected from the negativities of life. His father wanted him to continue as kind of like a prince, become kind of the head of a small kingdom. And he was told that his son, who would become Gautama Buddha, would either become a great leader or a great renouncer. He would go on a great spiritual path. Well, his father didn't want him to go on the spiritual path. He wanted him to continue as his successor, naturally enough. So the father tried to hide any kind of negativity. If a servant was growing old or was sick, they would just kind of quietly move him away and have a younger person come in and take over. Well, this is a bit idealized, perhaps romanticized, but of course it cannot succeed. Eventually, Gautama Buddha grew, married a lovely woman, had a lovely child, young boy, Rahula. He had everything. He was the son of a wealthy, more or less a king in a small kingdom at the time. He had 3 mansions, it was said, one for each season, where he could indulge in fine food and dance and music, entertainment. Women were there to take care of his every need. Well, perhaps it's a bit exaggerated. But we all know something of this experience, what it is to indulge in sense experience. And he did that to the limit. But eventually, of course, being an intelligent person, he started to see around him, wait a minute, what is that? Oh, that's a sick person. Oh, doesn't look very good. He had never seen it before, or so the legend goes. Could I become like that? Well, yes. Everyone who is alive can become ill. And it said the next day He saw a very old person bent over and having difficulty even walking. What is that? Oh, that's an old person, an aged person. Could I become like that? Yes. There's no way you can avoid it if you live long enough. The next day he saw a dead person, which is not uncommon to this day in certain parts of India, to see a dead person lying there. What is that? Oh, it's a dead person. What? Could I? Well, yes. Is there any way I can avoid that? No. Well, this is one way of understanding, kind of in primitive Buddhism, what we now call the one great matter of life and death, under our feet. Can you, even in the greatest health, avoid sickness? Can you prevent yourself from growing old and eventually dying? Well, if you dream, perhaps, but if you're awake to reality, you know. And yet, we try to avoid, to escape, to run away into, for example, sensuous indulgence, eating the finest food we can, seeing the most beautiful sights, listening to the most wonderful music, and so on. After a while, it can kind of become empty, can it? Well, what happened in the life of Gautama Buddha, in a sense, happens to us. When he realized this, he left home, as you know, and he became a great renouncer, giving up everything. His family, his wife, his child, the kingdom, everything. And he became a kind of a wandering ascetic, someone who perhaps tortures their body to help them on the way to some kind of enlightenment. Well, as you know, after some years of really hard practice, he was almost dead. They say his belly button or his navel was touching his backbone. And he was so pale that people looked at him and they thought, oh, he has died, he's dead. And other people said, no, but he's pretty close to it. And he realized, something's wrong. Something's wrong. I'm trying to force my way with willpower, not eating anything or just eating a handful of food each day, trying to hold his breath, not even breathing, not lying down to sleep. Well, it reports in the Pali Suttas, he got a tremendous headache, as you would. And he realized, I'm not getting enlightened, I'm not becoming free from the great matter of life and death at all. I'm dying myself, I'm killing myself. Something's not right. Very interesting what happens then. Is he, in the Pali Suttas, it says he spontaneously remembers a childhood experience where he was sitting under the shade of a rose apple tree, and there was, it's unclear, there are many different versions. The Tibetan version, he's already an adult. In the Chinese, the Pali, and the Sanskrit versions, he's a child. That seems more realistic. Anyway, he was sitting there watching a kind of a plowing festival. The earth was being plowed up. And he didn't have anything to do. He was the son of the king. So he sat there, shaded from the sun, and perhaps people there with fans to make sure he was comfortable. And he just, small child, didn't know anything about meditation, but he just spontaneously entered a kind of a samadhi, or concentrated oneness, that was very refreshing, and yet not attached to sensuous experience. In a sense, it was a kind of a release from sense experience. And he felt this as a child, just spontaneously. Very peaceful, very restful. He's remembering this experience. He's almost dead from doing these extreme practices. And then he, just from out of nowhere, it seems, remembers this childhood experience. And this becomes the trigger, you might say, the inspiration to awaken. Because then he realizes, in a sense, what was missing, what was lacking in his practice up until then. He was trying to force his way, but that childhood experience showed him something that was not forced at all. It was as if it was coming from the ground itself, just spontaneously. It wasn't forced at all. And it actually says in the Pali Suttas, as if Gautama Buddha is speaking to himself, he says, should I be afraid of that experience? No, I should not be afraid of that experience. As if he realizes that is what has been missing. So then, the famous story, of course, he takes refreshment. He bathes in the river, and the other ascetics that were with him, the 5 fellow practitioners, they saw him doing this, and I thought, he chickened out. He gave up. He went easy. He's indulging in sense pleasures. So they left him, and they said, if he comes, we will have a place for him, but we will not rise out of respect for him, although he was kind of their teacher. They didn't understand. They thought he had given up. So they left him. But then he sat under the Bodhi tree through the night and awakened. So it's very strange because it goes through all of these experiences of eating only a palm full of nuts, or not lying down, or even holding your... But the final experience that, in a sense, triggered his awakening, that took him beyond himself, was a childhood experience that, well, we all have. Maybe you weren't sitting under a rose apple tree in India, but we've all had experiences like that as children. I used to have it if I would go to the woods near where I lived in Philadelphia in the summer and just get lost in the woods. There was nothing to seek. Everything was just there. It was completely satisfying and fulfilling. We all have these experiences. Watching a sunset, listening to music, being with someone you love. Does anyone not understand what I'm talking about? It's pretty clear. So we know, not because Gautama Buddha said something or did something, we know from our own experience what it is to indulge, to give ourselves just to sensuous pleasures, and in a sense how empty it can really be. But we also know what it is like to just spontaneously experience this release, you might say. Oh, it's temporary, but it's showing us something valuable. This, in a word, is what we are talking about through doubt and through contentment. Because it doesn't say great doubt in the early Buddhist texts, but clearly Gautama Buddha had great doubt, very great doubt. As you may know, he practiced with 2 outstanding teachers of his time, and he got to the same level as them. And finally, those teachers said, "You are now the same as me. As I know, you know. You may now teach the congregation." And Gautama Buddha immediately, again, he's saying this to himself, wait a minute, is this the end of dis-ease? Is this the end of the great matter of life and death? Has it been resolved? In more traditional Buddhism, is dukkha, dis-ease, the first noble truth, and its origin in craving, Is it gone? No. Maybe for a while, in the depth of that meditation, it's gone. If you sit deeply enough in jhana, we can say there is no suffering there. But that experience itself is temporary and partial. And when we come out of it, we come back to ourselves. So it was very clear in the Pali Sutras, it says, immediately he knew. This teacher is telling me I am the same as him. I can now teach the congregation. But no, this is not the end of dis-ease. This is not the end of being. This is not the end of the great matter of life and death. So he leaves. He goes to another teacher who teaches him an even deeper dhyana. If we say samadhi is kind of concentrated oneness, dhyana is an even deeper state where, at least for a while, the self-consciousness itself is gone. But again, those states are also temporary. We go into and come out of them. And so even with that second teacher who taught him a very deep dhyana meditation, he realized, no, good stuff, but it's not the end of dis-ease. And so he left that teacher. That's when he goes on and almost kills himself. There's much we can learn from this experience. It's probably at least partly legendary, exaggerated, but the core, the heart of his experience, is it so different from our own? It's interesting, they speak of it as the middle way. You've all heard this. I'm sure the German is the same as the English. Every translation I've ever seen. The middle way. Not indulging in sensuous pleasures, of course, but not depriving the body, asceticism, not destroying the body either. No. Buddhism is the middle way between those extremes. This is nonsense. It completely misses the depth of the Buddhist experience. It's not the middle way, it's the core way that goes beyond both, that is released from both. The way it's explained nowadays in any Buddhist text I've ever read is always, not too much of this, not too much of that. We go in between, serenely steering between these extremes. No. They completely missed the point. It's very interesting what he says when he's really in the depth of it. He says, even if my bones dry up in my body, if the blood dries up in my body, until I have completely awakened, I will not rise from this seat. That's the middle way. You can't understand it if you see the middle way as simply in between. No. What he said when he sat down under the Bodhi tree was, no matter what, I'm not getting up until I have completely seen through. It's easy to misunderstand, isn't it? It can sound like, when we were little kids, I'm not going to get up until I have what I want. No, it's not that at all. He's not saying, I'm not getting up until I have what I want. What he's saying is, I can't get up. I can't do anything to step out of this. I cannot leave this practice for a moment. Look, he was a human being. He had to go to the toilet. He had to pee, especially if he had just had some nutritious meal. So when he says, I will not get up, he doesn't mean literally. He already had been through that. He already had tortured himself enough. What he meant was, I can't leave this practice. You see? Even if I do get up, the practice gets up. That's practice. That's real practice. But you see how easy it is to distort or superficially understand or misunderstand these kinds of Buddhist expressions. The middle way. It goes beyond. It leaves both behind. This is the real middle way. And this is the way which releases us, you might say, from pain and from pleasure, from life and from death. To put it more Zenistically, we are free from the very need to be free. Free from the very need to be anything. The craving self cannot realize that. You see? Even when it tries to deny itself, it's still craving. But to be free of the very need to be, to put it bluntly, to be anything, this is release. This is not a state. This is not an experience, even a very deep samadhi or dhyana. It's to be free from the very need to be anything. This is the point of Buddhism and of genuine Zen.